So, Solo Leveling just had what was probably the most insane episode of this entire series so far. As we watched our OP boy, our main character Jin-Woo, face off against the Black Ant in one of the best animated fight scenes I've ever seen since the finale of Season 4 of Demon Slayer and the most recent season of Jujutsu Kaisen. Hello everyone, I'm Finn, welcome back to Finn Films. Join me today as once again we are breaking down and explaining everything that happened in this week's episode of Solo Leveling Season 2, Episode 12, in what I think is easily the craziest and quite easily the best episode of Solo Leveling to date. So last time on Solo Leveling, the S-ranked Korean hunters made their way in the heart of the nest on the Jeju Island as the Jeju Island arc, the Jeju Island raid, had begun. The Korean hunters taking on the Queen Ant and her ant army. Meanwhile, the mysterious Black Ant has easily, brutally killed a number of S-ranked Japanese hunters, cutting their head off in some of the craziest, most bloodiest scenes we've seen so far in Solo Leveling. The Korean hunter team manages to defeat the Queen and her army, celebrating, believing that they had finally cleared the Jeju Island and gotten revenge for the multiple failed raids over the last few years. Until suddenly, they are all overwhelmed by a massive magical aura as the Black Ant, the king of the ants, enters. Seeing its mother dead, it goes into a rage, easily cutting down the S-ranked Korean hunters like they are completely nothing. Sensing the presence of the leader of the Japanese hunter, Goto, the most powerful of the Japanese hunter, the Black Ant leaves, the Koreans bloody and dying, heading out to face Goto while the hordes of ants descend upon the wounded Koreans. Episode 11 ending as Jin-Woo comes to the aid of Cha Hunter and the other Koreans. Episode 12 opens as Jin-Woo's shadow exchanges coming to the aid of the Korean hunters, his shadow army emerging, blowing away the waves of ants. We do need to remember that up until this point, basically none of these S-ranked hunters had truly seen the extent of Jin-Woo's powers bar Cha Hunter. Whether it's his massive shadow army or his own insane physical assassin powers, so they are all completely shocked and taken back by just how strong Jin-Woo has become, how strong Jin-Woo is, and getting to see the extent of just his true nature, his true powers, both his magical powers, his caster powers, and his physical prowess. Meanwhile, on mainland Korea, everyone is absolutely freaking out after losing the live broadcast as the rest of the nation fears that their hunter saviors, their S-ranked hunters, are all dead, while the Japanese Hunter Association assumes that Goto, their strongest hunter, must be dead, as his vitals have gone offline and no one knows exactly what has happened to him. Jin-Woo hands out health potions, healing the other Korean hunters except for Cha Hunter, whose wounds are too severe to be healed and needs medical attention ASAP as her life begins to fade. The S-ranked Korean hunters are still absolutely shook seeing the power of Jin-Woo's elite shadow warriors in action against the ant, when suddenly a powerful magical aura overwhelms them, the army of ants halting their attack as the Black Ant King has returned. All the hunters are paralyzed with fear except for Jin-Woo, confidently striding forward like the main character OP badass Giga Chad that he is, as the ant asks him if he is king of the humans. As the show is very much teasing here in these scenes that the Japanese hunter Goto is dead, but we didn't actually see him die on camera, so you know the rules of any anime, any show. Thank you, Game of Thrones. If you don't actually see a character die on screen, you can never actually be sure that he is actually dead. The other S-ranked hunters think that Jin-Woo is completely crazy getting into melee with this ant, as again, they still believe that Jin-Woo is a mage caster type hunter. When suddenly, the signal to the cameraman's live stream goes back online, the broadcasters in Korea deciding to say, "Fuck it, we're doing it live," and broadcasting this battle to the entire country. As suddenly, all throughout Korea, all of Jin-Woo's friends and his own sister are shocked to see him standing face to face with this monstrous ant. Yeah, what a crazy come up from our weak little boy, the weakest of all hunters, to now the strongest of all hunters and the savior of Korea. Finally, after all of this waiting and hype, we get what is by far the best fight scene of the entire series, in the entirety of Solo Leveling so far up until this point. I am not even joking. You know that the folks over at A1 Animations probably dropped a major portion of their budget for this season on this animated fight scene, the next like 5-6 minutes of our show, and goddamn does it look amazing. as we watch the black ant strike out, punching Jin-Woo in the face, an attack that likely would have instantly killed basically any other hunter outside of Jin-Woo. Jin-Woo, though, like the Giga Chad he is, completely no-sells it, eating that up to the other hunter's shock as he uses his ruler's hand to hold the ant still, returning with his own punch, knocking it backwards. Yeah, I guess putting all those points into his strength stat really did pay off in the end. As suddenly we watch Jin-Woo and the ant engage in some old-fashioned shonen shenanigans, some Dragon Ball Z-esque hand-to-hand combat as the two powerful fighters beat the absolute piss out of each other. Suddenly, though, the ant unleashes its secret weapon, a stinger from inside its mouth that grazes Jin-Woo, infecting him with a toxin that paralyzes him. The hunters all look on in horror as it seems like our main character is about to meet his end, except if you were actually paying attention, you would have known that Jin-Woo is actually immune to all poisons, as we learned in earlier on in Season 2 when he got that ability. So he easily catches the ant's punch, returning with his own, again launching the ant across the cave. Here is where things really start to ramp up and go crazy with our animators. The ant, not accepting that it is possible for someone to be as strong as it is, transforms into a more humanoid form, its claws extending to razor-like sharp knives, Jin-Woo summoning his ruler's blades, the epic music coming in hot as the two engage in blade-on-blade combat. Jin-Woo gets pushed back, but he continues to outmatch the ant at every step, the two moving at blinding speeds, in a very classic kind of shonen battle anime trope session, but I absolutely love it. Again, this series of animations being the best fight scene, the best animations of anything that we've seen in Solo Leveling so far. I mean, some of the animation sequences in this episode are absolutely insane. Unfortunately, I can't show you all of it. I would if I could. So you really need to go and watch this episode if you haven't seen it already. Jin-Woo, though, finally gets caught off guard as again it looks like he might meet his end, the ant's razor-sharp claws coming inches away from his eye when he activates his mutilation skill at max rank, cutting the ant's arms off as he springs into action, cutting the rest of him to shreds. The ant regenerating its body as it begins to run away, experiencing fear for the first time in its life, as Jin-Woo chases down, continuing to slice it into pieces again and again. We get this absolutely dope slow-mo scene of Jin-Woo's army of elite soldiers cutting down the ant army as the caves are covered in flames by Tusk's fireball. Jin-Woo steps over the black ant, looking down it like a predator stalking his prey. The ant tries to flee in terror, knowing it needs to run to stay alive, but again, Jin-Woo uses his mutilation skill, finally cutting it to pieces. The Jeju Island arc and Jeju Island raid finally being done in revenge for all the failed previous attempts, all of this done on camera for the entire country of Korea to see the true powers of the most powerful hunter, their savior in all of Korea, our boy Jin-Woo. In the final moments of our scene, we see Jin-Woo rushing back over to Cha Hunter, who is barely hanging on to life, as he attempts to use the elixir of life on her, but it has no effect. He panics as he begins to think what could he possibly do to save her, as there is no time to get her to the mainland, and he cannot use his Shadow Exchange again after using it so recently, and the one S-ranked healer that they had recently died, getting its head bitten off by the Black Ant King. Jin-Woo turning to look at the camera, a look of determination on his face, as it seems he has come up with a plan, and our episode ends. Again, this is probably the most insane episode of Solo Leveling so far. This is very obviously the kind of hype, the kind of major climax moment of Season 2 of Solo Leveling. Even though we still have one more episode, this was very much the kind of finale in many ways in terms of all action anime, animation battle scenes, and man, did it really live up to the hype. This fight scene in the manhwa is super epic, and they really did manage to capture a lot of the absolutely insane artwork that is in the manhwa, in these scenes, in the animations, as again, it's very obvious that they saved up a large portion of their budget for this fight scene, as it makes sense. Again, this being some of the most epic animation scenes from the entire, Season 1 and Season 2 of Solo Leveling so far, easily being just as good, if not better, than the, Baran fight scenes from a few episodes ago, as well as the opening scenes with Jin-Woo in the double dungeon all the way back in the opening of Season 1. At this point, our OP boy is easily probably the most powerful hunter, maybe outside of one or two characters that we really haven't gotten introduced yet in all of the world right now. He is definitely the most powerful hunter in Korea, and it's not even close. Remember, the Black Ant easily outmatched and easily basically almost killed the entirety of the S-ranked Korean hunter force that was sent in to raid Jeju Island by itself. So what, that was like 6 or 7 Korean S-ranked hunters that it easily outmatched by itself. Meanwhile, Jin-Woo was able to go toe-to-toe, continuing to elevate himself, and pretty easily, relatively, able to destroy and kill this Black Ant, the most powerful magical beast we've seen so far. Our boy Jin-Woo has truly ascended, if you will. He is beyond OP at this point, a true Giga Chad in some of the most Giga Chad scenes of this anime so far, and I love it. Generally, in my opinion, anime that use OP main pro tags generally don't work. I generally don't like them because it's really hard to like have stakes for a show if you know that your main character is constantly going to overcome any kind of battle stakes, you know, anything that he comes across. However, I think Solo Leveling do a really good job in still being able to create stakes in the story by using all of the characters around Jin-Woo, by making us invested in caring about the other side characters, the other hunters around Jin-Woo, who are easily not as strong as him. It makes us actually have stakes and be invested in the show. If characters like Cha Hunter and the other hunters are constantly at threat of dying, even if our main character generally, basically never is any real threat of ever dying, if those around him, the people that he cares about if they very much can die, and we've seen them almost die at times, the characters dying, then it really does raise the stakes. I've talked about this before with Solo Leveling, but I really do think that this is a very clever way to have this kind of main character, this OP main character trope, but still manage to make it to where we actually can get invested into the story and there actually will be stakes. That, in addition to the fact that Solo Leveling takes place in our real world as opposed to like a fantasy isekai world, Solo Leveling very much being a kind of example of a reverse isekai, if you will. Isekai kind of fantasy elements and themes, those kind of typical fantasy isekai tropes, but taking place in our real world. If you combine those two things together, it makes for a super awesome anime while still using a lot of tropes that have been really much played out in a lot of kind of anime throughout the last few years, again with fantasy isekai, as well as like, the classic kind of OP main protagonist. But Solo Leveling is able to use all of these themes and do it in a really fresh, new, fun way, and on top it all off with absolutely epic animations, epic fight scenes. As well, they really hit us off with a big major cliffhanger here with what will the fate of Cha Hunter be. Though, if you are a keen-eyed fan and able to put 2 and 2 together, it seems pretty obvious what actually Jin-Woo will do to ultimately save her, as there is one really obvious glaring option for what Jin-Woo could do to save her if we go through and think about all of the abilities and powers that Jin-Woo has. As if we think about it, what is Jin-Woo's most obvious power, his most obvious necromancer ability power? It is his ability to revive people from the dead. And who did we see die in the last episode? None other than an S-ranked hunter. So to me, it seems pretty obvious that this is kind of what they're setting up here, though I guess I could be wrong. Overall, an absolute banger episode of Solo Leveling, easily one of the most hyped, absolutely insane episodes of Solo Leveling, from the super awesome, story plot that we had going on here, to crazy animations, absolutely banger OST music to go along with the crazy fight scenes in animations, and I absolutely loved it. We only have one episode of Solo Leveling left for Season 2, the finale that will come next week. I look very much forward to seeing what the kind of teaser, the cliffhanger will be for the end of Season 2 of Solo Leveling. Methinks we might get a surprise appearance from Jin-Woo's dad, who was teased early on in the events of Season 2 of Solo Leveling, but I guess we're gonna have to wait until next week to find out. As always, guys, if you did enjoy this video, learn something new, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, as that is the easiest way to support me, and it really does go a long way in putting these videos into the algorithm. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode of Solo Leveling in the comment section down below. If you did enjoy this video, then why don't you check out some of my other anime and Solo Leveling content on screen now. Once again, guys, thank you again for continuing to support me and watching my content. I hope to see you in the next one. Stay safe out there. Until next time, peace Love. Adu.